Hey everyone, have you ever noticed that one phrase that pops up again and again throughout the entire Bible? Every single time an angel shows up to someone, you hear the same exact warning. Don't be afraid. Sometimes it's fear not. Other times it's do not be afraid. But the message is always the same. And get this, it's repeated over 300 times in Scripture. And here's a truth. Very few people actually know. We've been lied to. The angels in the Bible are not what most people think they are. They're not chubby babies with wings floating on clouds, or ethereal women in flowing white robes. That image, totally made up. The real truth is far more intense. The actual angels described in the Bible are terrifying, incomprehensible, and profoundly impactful beings. They don't fit into human logic, and when they appear, they cause absolute terror. We see it over and over again in the Bible. Don't be afraid. Mary, the angel tells the young virgin when announcing she'll carry the Son of God. Abraham heard these exact words when he looked up at the stars, and so did the shepherds on that night in Bethlehem. But why so much fear? What did these beings look like to scare people so much? The answer is clear. Because what they were seeing wasn't human. And that's the truth we're going to reveal today. We're going to shatter the false image of angels and discover what they really look like according to the Bible. We'll dive deep into the levels of heaven and the invisible hierarchies that exist. And trust me, you'll want to stick around until the very end, because today, you're going to learn about something very few dare to reveal. The most mysterious angels in the entire Bible, the Ophanim. These are the most incomprehensible beings ever described. Living wheels covered in eyes that spin eternally guarding God's throne. The three heavens, a cosmic map. When we hear the word heaven, many of us just picture one single place, a bright spiritual space where God lives and souls rest. But the Bible never describes heaven as a single simple location. Quite the opposite. It paints a picture of a complex structure, a hierarchy with distinct levels, functions, and domains that vibrate just above us. The Apostle Paul makes it super clear when he says, I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. If there's a third heaven, then there must be a first and a second. This means the celestial world isn't flat or uniform. It's organized, layered, and filled with distinct functions, just like a real kingdom. The Bible reveals that heaven is far more complex than we could ever imagine. We live surrounded by an invisible world, a world that interacts with ours, even if we don't perceive it. Let's break down the levels. The first heaven, the visible sky. This is the heaven we can all see, the firmament, the atmosphere, the space around earth. It's what God created in the beginning when he said, "Let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky." This is just the lowest level. Angels or spiritual powers don't live here. It's the stage for visible creation, where we find clouds, the sun, the moon, and the stars. The second heaven, the intermediate spiritual realm. Beyond what our eyes can see lies this invisible, yet incredibly active level. The second heaven is an intermediate domain, where a constant spiritual war is waged. What happens there influences earth, and what happens on earth resonates on that plane. This is where both fallen angels, who still hold power, and God's angels, acting as warriors and messengers, operate, battling for divine will. Many of these beings still function as spiritual powers over regions, cultures, and empires. We see this clearly in the book of Daniel, when an angel appears to him and says something mind-boggling. From the first day that you set your heart to understand, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. This prince of Persia isn't an earthly king. It's a spiritual entity dominating that region from the invisible plane, blocking the messenger's path to Daniel. The archangel Michael, one of the leaders of the heavenly army, had to intervene to clear the way. This tells us that the second heaven is a spiritual battlefield, a disputed territory between light and darkness. And most importantly, humanity isn't outside that battle. There are invisible dominions, thrones, and armies in a dimension our eyes can't see, but that constantly affect us and human history. The third heaven, God's throne. Above everything else is the highest, purest, and most inaccessible level. This is the place of God's eternal throne, where there is no shadow of evil or contamination. It's also called paradise, because it's the place of full communion with God. This is the heaven Isaiah saw when he said, "I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and exalted, and the train of his robe filled the temple." Here there's no war, no darkness, no opposition. It's the very heart of the eternal kingdom. This is the heaven John describes in Revelation, where the seals are opened and the living creatures circle the throne, proclaiming, "Holy, holy, holy." And it's there, in the third heaven, where the angels closest to God reside. Because not all angels are created equal, just as heaven is organized into these three levels. Angels also have their hierarchies. Some are messengers, others are warriors, others guard sacred places. Each has a specific role and occupies a specific place in the kingdom, and not all of them inhabit the same heaven. Some act on earth, some fight in the intermediate heavens, and some never leave God's presence. But there's a type of angel unlike any we've ever imagined. This is the most mysterious angel in the Bible, the one nobody truly understands, but who upholds God's glory. They are the Ophanim, and to grasp their nature, we first need to understand the hierarchy of heaven's armies. The hierarchy of angels, heaven's invisible army. When we hear the word angel, we often think of just one kind of being. But in the Bible, angel literally means messenger. The scriptures and ancient texts reveal that the celestial realm is made up of distinct orders, each with specific tasks and positions, like a perfectly structured army. Imagine an invisible kingdom, as organized as any human kingdom, but infinitely vaster. There are ranks, functions, and hierarchies, and each type of angel operates on a different plane of heaven. In the first and second heavens, you'll find the angels and archangels. Simple angels, messengers. At the lowest level are the simple angels, the messengers. These are the ones who interact with us the most. They appear in dreams, guide, protect, and deliver specific messages. These are the angels who visited Lot before the destruction of Sodom and who accompanied Jacob in his vision of the heavenly ladder. Angels descending and ascending, acting on earth to fulfill divine commands. Archangels, chief angels. Higher up in the celestial hierarchy, after the common angels, are the archangels. The very word literally means chief angels, and their rank is formidable. They don't just deliver individual messages. They are strategists, leaders of invisible battles, commanders of entire hosts. In the Bible, only one is explicitly named with this title, Archangel Michael. He's the great prince who defends God's people and the leader who, in Revelation, battles the dragon and casts Satan and his rebellious angels out of heaven. But Michael isn't alone. Judeo-Christian tradition, reflected in texts like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Tobit, reveals that other archangels of great importance exist. Archangel Gabriel is the messenger of the greatest revelations. He appears in the book of Daniel to explain prophecies and later appears to Zechariah to announce the birth of John the Baptist, and months later to Mary to announce she will carry the Son of God. Archangel Raphael, the healer and protector, accompanies young Tobias, delivers him from danger, defeats an evil spirit, and restores sight to Tobias's father. He himself declares, "I am Raphael, one of the 7 angels who stand before the glory of the Lord." And finally, Archangel Uriel, mentioned in the book of Enoch, the illuminator of prophecies, who reveals secrets about the end times and the nature of divine glory. These 4 names are just a glimpse, because apocryphal texts even speak of 7 archangels who stand before God's throne, each with specific missions. However, despite their authority and their closeness to us, archangels are not at the top of the hierarchy. They are part of what tradition calls the third hierarchy, closer to the human world, and above them are even higher orders, dedicated not to warring or delivering messages, but to living in the very presence of God. The higher orders, guardians and adorers. Further up in the third heaven, we find the Cherubim and Seraphim. Cherubim, guardians of the sacred. Cherubim are guardians of the sacred. They are the ones who protect the places where God's presence dwells. The first time the Bible mentions them is in Eden, when man is expelled and God places cherubim with a flaming sword to guard the way to the tree of life. He placed cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way. Later, in the Ark of the Covenant, God commands that cherubim be sculpted on the ark, extending their wings over the mercy seat, guarding the place where God spoke with Moses. Their appearance is revealed in more detail in Ezekiel's visions. 4 faces of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle, and 4 wings, straight legs like a calf's, and a polished bronze glow, seraphim, closest to the throne. Even higher are the seraphim, the closest to the throne. Their name means burning ones or fiery ones. They are beings of fire, of pure light, so close to God's presence that they appear lit up like living coals. Isaiah saw them around God's throne and reveals their form. I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and exalted, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. Their voices weren't soft. Isaiah says they spoke to one another, and their words thundered through the temple. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. In that instant, Isaiah realized something. He was gazing at perfect holiness, and he was unworthy to be there. He thought his lips had spoken incorrect things, and that he lived among a people who also did. That truth made him fall to his knees, and he cried out in fear, "Woe is me! I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King." But then something unthinkable happened. One of the burning seraphim detached from its flight around the throne. It took a glowing, fiery hot coal and approached Isaiah. It placed that red-hot coal on Isaiah's lips and said, "See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for." In that moment, Isaiah felt something change within him. The fire had purified him, and from that moment on, his lips were no longer his own. They became an instrument of God's voice. This is how the seraphim are. Burning beings, covered in wings, always in motion, always proclaiming the glory of the Most High. They are not warriors or messengers. They are perpetual worshipers. Their function is pure adoration, the continuous proclamation of God's holiness. And that's why they are beings consumed by divine glory, reflecting purity and fire. The Ophanim, God's living wheels. And finally, alongside the seraphim are the ones almost never mentioned, the Ophanim. Though their name might seem symbolic, they are real creatures appearing in one of the most perplexing accounts in the entire Bible. The vision of the prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel was far from home, exiled in Babylon. Jerusalem had fallen, the temple was in ashes, and the promised land seemed forgotten by God. But then, God showed him something far more unsettling. It wasn't a vision of the past or a promise for his present. It was a revelation of the future. Ezekiel recounts the moment with precision. In the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the exiles by the Chebar Canal, the heavens were opened and I saw visions of God. The Chebar Canal was a large waterway near Babylon, an artery used for trade and forced labor by the exiles. A marginalized Jewish community lived there, far from the temple and far from God. For 5 years, Ezekiel lived as one of the deported, watching as the people repeated their mistakes even in a foreign land. But suddenly, the heavens opened. Ezekiel looks up, and from the north, a hurricane-force wind rises. And in the midst of that wind comes a gigantic cloud enveloped in fire, with lightning flashing from end to end. From that cloud emerge 4 living creatures, the cherubim of God. Each has 4 faces, one of a man, one of a lion, one of an ox, and one of an eagle. Their wings extend, 2 upward covering their bodies, and 2 touching the wings of the being next to them. Their legs are straight, their feet like calves' hooves, shining like burnished bronze. They don't walk like us. They move in a straight line, never turning, because they go exactly where the Spirit guides them. The sound of their wings is deafening. Ezekiel describes it as the roar of many waters, like the voice of the Almighty Himself, like the sound of an army on the march. Everything around them trembles with that sound, as if the air were alive and the earth shook beneath their feet. And then Ezekiel sees something no prophet had ever described before. I looked, and behold, there was a wheel on the earth beside the living creatures. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like the color of beryl, and their appearance and their work were like a wheel within a wheel. For the first time in the Bible, living wheels covered in eyes appear, moving in unison with the cherubim. When the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them. For the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Ezekiel is astonished. How can he describe something like this? He uses earthly words for something never before seen. Gigantic wheels. But they weren't normal wheels. They were wheels within wheels, as if one rotated perpendicularly inside the other, allowing them to move in any direction without turning. Their appearance was dazzling, like beryl, and something even more terrifying. They were covered in eyes all around. Ezekiel insists that the wheels moved in unison with the living creatures. When the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them. And when they lifted up from the earth, the wheels lifted up. And he adds something that leaves us speechless. The spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Can you imagine it? They are part of a perfect celestial organism, as if God's very throne were alive and in constant motion. The wheels had no separate will. They didn't act on their own, but were so united with the cherubim that they seemed like a single being. Where one went, all went, and where one looked, all turned. They don't speak or announce any word, because their function isn't to bring news or execute judgments. They are simply there bearing glory. They are the mobile base of the celestial chariot, the living support of God's throne. But everything Ezekiel saw has a deep meaning. The wheels were covered with eyes everywhere. There was no blind spot, no hidden place. The eyes see everything. And this represents something only God possesses: omniscience. He sees everything, and the eyes of the wheels are the declaration that His knowledge is absolute and His movement is constant. The wheels don't stop. They move forward without turning. They rise and descend, moving in perfect synchronicity with the cherubim. This isn't just a display of power. It's the symbol of God's omnipresence. His throne isn't fixed in one place. He is everywhere at the same time. His presence travels through the heavens, crosses the seas, penetrates prisons, and rises even in exile. But why a wheel within a wheel? Why that impossible gear? This form represents something our minds cannot grasp: infinity, eternity, and divine mystery. One wheel within another wheel, spinning endlessly, without beginning or end, without depending on human axes. That's how God is: eternal, limitless, beyond all schemes. What is incomprehensible to us is His very nature, a perfect system that needs no instructions. Ezekiel observes and repeats. They moved with the Spirit. There's no voice guiding them, no external commands, no need for maps or paths, because the Spirit of God Himself is their direction. Ezekiel discovers that God's glory is not tied to a place. The celestial throne is not static. It moves, and His presence can manifest anywhere. Ancient visions, modern relevance. Ezekiel's vision isn't an isolated case. Throughout the Bible, other prophets and visionaries had similar glimpses of heaven, and their words fit together like pieces of the same puzzle. Daniel, for example, witnessed something astonishing while contemplating the end times. As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. There they are again, wheels associated with the throne. Flaming wheels that are not mere ornaments, but symbols of movement, power, and God's active presence. Centuries before Christ, the prophet Zechariah also saw something that adds to this mystery. Then I looked up again, and there before me were 4 chariots coming out from between 2 mountains, mountains of bronze. The first chariot had red horses, the second black, the third white, and the fourth dappled, all of them powerful. Those chariots were sent to patrol the earth, messengers and executors of divine judgments. It's an apocalyptic image that suggests movement, commands being fulfilled, a heaven that acts in human history. And in the last book of the Bible, John is caught up in the Spirit and describes the eternal throne. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders. And around the throne and on the throne were 4 living creatures, and they were covered with eyes, in front and behind. Again, the same structure, a greater throne, lesser thrones, living creatures covered in eyes, all forming an organized celestial court. When you combine these testimonies, the picture becomes clearer. We are not looking at isolated visions, but fragments of the same design. A structured heaven, a real kingdom, a moving throne, and a court that functions as a living organism. Wheels, chariots, burning beings, elders on thrones. Everything speaks of a perfect order in the invisible, a celestial government that sustains and directs all creation. The Ophanim's enduring mystery. But the Bible isn't the only place the Ophanim appear. In the book of Enoch, the Ophanim are mentioned by name. And the Seraphim, Cherubim, and Ophanim, all the angels of power, and the angels of the principalities and the chosen, and the rest who are upon the earth and upon the water, all lifted their voices with one purpose and glorified, blessed, praised, and exalted with one spirit, with one voice. Enoch describes being taken before God's throne, and there he saw the Ophanim spinning eternally, surrounded by fire and splendor, alongside the cherubim, seraphim, and the most powerful archangels. They were conscious entities, part of the living machinery of the kingdom. Enoch states their eyes are countless, their movement is endless, and their presence fills even the lesser angels with trembling. But Enoch adds something else the Bible doesn't mention. He calls them angels of sound and eternity. According to this ancient book, their movement is not silent. It produces a roar like thunder, a song that sustains the cosmos. They are living gears that mark the rhythm of time and guard the mystery of eternity. They are voices without mouths, hymns without words, resounding before the throne of the Most High. And it's not just Jewish texts that speak of them. Centuries later, in Christian theology, the mysterious Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite included them in his famous classification of celestial hierarchies. There, the Ophanim are identified as part of the thrones, the highest level of the 9 celestial hierarchies, alongside seraphim and cherubim. Dionysius describes them as bearers of divine justice and government, being so close to God that they reflect His will without the need for words. When we think of these ancient visions, we might believe they're just distant stories, but the Bible tells us something different. Paul wrote, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." This means what happens in the invisible directly affects what we experience here and now. Angels, including these mysterious Ophanim, are not mere symbols. In the Bible, we read, "Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation?" There are invisible realities all around us, spiritual movements that sustain, protect, and fulfill God's will, while we go about our daily lives without perceiving it. God's throne is not immobile in a corner of the universe. It moves, it advances, because His glory is not confined to a temple or a moment in the past. Don't be afraid. And now, after looking into heaven and glimpsing the mystery of the Ophanim, the words with which it all began resonate with new power. Don't be afraid. Don't fear what you don't understand. Don't fear the invisible. And don't fear the mysteries of heaven. Open your spiritual eyes. Let this vision ignite your faith. Seek the truth and surrender to what surpasses your understanding. And now, after everything you've heard, I ask you, do you feel like there are angels acting around you, even if you don't see them? We live in times where the spiritual and the earthly cross paths more than we imagine, and what seemed ancient is more alive than ever. Do you recognize traces of what you've heard today in what's happening around you? Have you seen signs? Leave your comment in the comment box below. And if you want to keep exploring these hidden mysteries of the Bible, hit that like button and share this video, because that's how we'll know we should keep revealing more secrets of the kingdom, more visions, and more prophecies that are being fulfilled before our very eyes. And if you want to go even deeper, click on the video you see on screen right now, the book of Isaiah, because Isaiah was the prophet who saw it all. He saw heaven opened, the fall of empires, he heard the Seraphim, and he left warnings of the end times. But Isaiah didn't just see judgment, he also saw eternal hope. He saw the Messiah before he was born, and was the first to announce the great promise, the Savior who would come to take away the sin of the world. If this topic has impacted you, what you'll discover in the book of Isaiah will impact you even more. Blessings.